Hi, folks. Hope you are okay. We're in our next stream, and we're looking at Michel Foucault, a French philosopher and historian, a postmodernist. Why are we looking at this chap? We're just going to maybe 5, 10, maybe 20 minutes. I don't know. But I think it's important. If you're going to be on the streets evangelizing and preaching on the streets, if you're going to be doing pastoral care, especially with young people, you need to understand where our society's got to. And one of the main influential thinkers in the 20th century that's influenced today is Michel Foucault. All this transgenderism, some of his ideas and thinking, and other French philosophers and intellectuals have been behind all this transgenderism today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Foucault, and then just talk a little bit about his ideas. So he was born on the 15th of October 1926, and he died on 25th of June 1984. He was a French philosopher, literary critic, and historian of ideas, and analyzed the relationship between power, knowledge, and liberty, and how they are used from a social control through institutions sometimes called structuralist or postmodernist. He rejected these labels and sought to critique authority without limiting himself. His thought has influenced academics in anthropology, communication studies, criminology, cultural studies, feminism, literary theory, psychology, sociology. It has been influential in arguments against homophobia, racial justice, prejudice, ideological doctrines, critical race theory, and Marxism. He was born in Poitiers, France, in an upper middle class family. Came from a very wealthy family. He was educated at Lycée Henry IV and at École Normale, kind of Catholic institutions, developing an interest in philosophy and coming under the influence of Jean Hippolyte and Louis Althusser. At the University of Paris, he earned degrees in philosophy and psychology, and after several years as a cultural diplomat abroad, he returned to France and published his first major book, The History of Madness. While working at the University of Clermont-Ferrand in 1960 to 66, he produced The Birth of the Clinic in 1963, The Order of Things in 1966, which have a structuralist affinity, which he later distanced himself. He wrote The Archaeology of Knowledge and then The History of Sexuality. So now we'll get into the meat of it, why it's important. So Foucault came from a very wealthy family and he was brought up in Catholicism, but he had a very struggle with suicide. He wanted to commit suicide as a young man, and even in his room he would have pictures of suicide. And he was put in an asylum, and the man who dealt with him felt it was Foucault's desire for homosexuality and the dark side of homosexuality, where the fetishes of wearing leather and whipping yourself and all that. And so because of that suppression, it made him end up wanting to commit suicide because society wouldn't accept that. So when he came out, this had a big impact on him. So he had a big animosity towards coercion, because obviously if you're in an asylum, you're going to be coerced. And then the big impact, so that had a huge impact on his mindset. And the second thing that had a big impact on his mindset is the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche had the idea that there was not going to be in the future good and evil, that it's about will to power, that it's about those who are striving for power. There's no such thing as good and evil anymore. and the only future is nihilism. In other words, there's no ultimate meaning or purpose or morals. It's just whatever you want to do. So Foucault, and this is the key to his thinking and mindset. He took Nietzsche and he took Nietzsche and he pushed it to as far as he could go. As far as he could go. So what he did in the area of every part of society, he wanted to undermine and say there is no formal structure. In other words, it was a rebellion against nature. Whatever nature is, it is not reality, it is what we construct. So modernism is about verification, foundationalism, evidence, and what is there. Postmodernism is there is no such thing as what is there. It's what you create. It's what you want to be. And he took Friedrich Nietzsche and he pushed it to such an extent that every form of this is a rule or regulation or this is the evidence and the structure of whatever nature we can understand, he inverted it. He wanted to push humanity to the point where man would be abolished. Now that thinking you can see behind transgenderism, because transgenderism is not about nature. It's about what you think, about what you construct. It's about social construction. I want to identify, I'm a man, but imagine I want to identify as a woman. Because there's no such thing as a man, I can construct whatever I want to be. That is pure Foucaultian. That is pure from the French philosopher Foucault and other French philosophers of his day. So the way that pan out is he wrote a book on the history of madness, and obviously he was in an asylum when he was younger. And there he looked at madness and he looked at the Renaissance and he saw that madness was tolerated, that it was seen as creative. Madness only became something to be more defined and to be people to be put in asylum in the Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment time. So again, madness is a social construction. Then he wrote a book on the birth of the clinic, and also on prisons, and he talked about how the prison system, where people are criminalized, it's just a social construction. There is no such thing as criminalization. And he actually advocated, crazily, that there should be no form of punishment whatsoever. In his book, The Order of Things, he looks at the history of Western philosophy from the time of the Renaissance. And he deconstructs it by saying that there is no, like Hegel, Hegel had the idea that there was a logical progression, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, a logical progression. But Foucault said, no, there's no logical progression. History is arbitrary. There is no necessary condition why we went from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment. It's all arbitrary. So what that means is morals. There's no morals. There's no such thing as man and woman. There's no such thing as a criminal. No such thing as madness. All the structures that we understand from nature have been controverted. And he brings that more and more in The Order of Things, in his book, The Order of Things, and then carries it on in his other book, goes further with that in The Archaeology of Knowledge. He also, again, like I said, talking about crime, discipline and punish in 1975. And then he takes these ideas of moving away from nature and saying we can construct whatever we want in the history of sexuality in 1976. So there he looks at the history of sexuality. Interesting, he doesn't mention anything about women. It's all about men. He wrote his last, it was a 3-volume work, and the last work that he wrote on that, it got AIDS. He was very much into the gay scene, and he had a number of lovers, and also he liked the kind of fetish leather kind of scene as well in the gay scene. And he got AIDS, and in his last book that he wrote, he was dying. That is in that book on sexuality, the last 3 volumes that he wrote, it was to move as much as you could away from nature. It doesn't matter what nature is. Nature is we're just a social construction, which is crazy. I mean, you know, this cup is part of nature. I've just hit it. It's not a social construction. It's a reality, you know. So the reason why I've done this is just to show you this idea, this postmodernist taking Friedrich Nietzsche to his ultimate conclusion, this nihilistic philosophy being pushed to the very foundation, shows you that Foucault is a very revolutionary in the sense that he is controverting nature and controverted any morals, any meta-narratives are to be smashed and broken so that man can be free. And so you can understand how transgender ideology, for example, it's become part of, it's a kind of Foucaultian project in a way. So because you can understand a little bit about Foucault, it helps you to understand a little bit about transgenderism and what's going on in society today. Just a little side as well, because of this philosophy, Foucault signed a paper, Sexuality, Morality and the Law, in 1978, advocating for there being no limitation on minors. In other words, minors should have the right to choose to have sexual intercourse, basically. Any barriers laid down against children who want to have sex, those barriers should not be there. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And in fact, Sartre, Deleuze, and Derrida, they all signed that document as well. And it can be verified in Abnormal Lectures, 1974, 1975. So we finished a little bit on Michel Foucault, and I could give you a bit more history, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a thought about this philosopher, that the more you move away from nature, the more you move away from what is truth, the more you move away from what is good and evil, and say freedom is how we construct it, then in the end, man is not free. He becomes a slave. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. So hope it's been a help to you. There's some books underneath if you want to go and read about him. And sometimes it's good to get behind the movements of today, and see what's underlying in it. And Michel Foucault is one. All right, take care and God bless you.